The following is an interview with Venerable Javanasami from Myanmar about the relationship between Theravada Buddhist texts and forms of Burmese art, particularly literature and performance arts in Burmese society. My interest in this topic comes from the observation that the Dhamma talk is maybe the only thing that a monk can do by way of conveying Buddhist teachings or communicating Buddhist teachings. So we have very limited possibilities of disseminating the Buddha's teachings in society, and it's basically only the Dhamma talk. There is very little other possibilities. And the Dhamma talk is great, but sometimes, you see, giving a speech is not always the most effective way of conveying a message, especially if that message or teaching involves complexity or requires contemplation. And so other means are sometimes needed and have been observed already in our human history to function as a alternative to just verbal speech. And these, of course, the various forms of art. Another increasing challenge that we are facing right now is the fact that in order for a Dhamma talk to be effective, it actually requires a certain amount of motivation and faith on the part of the listener. So it's not just the monk or the teacher and the qualities of the speaker. It's also the qualities, the mental qualities of the listener. And then another further challenge is that recognizing speech is something that generally requires a certain measure of attentiveness. Let's say an attention span that is becoming increasingly difficult to encounter with modern technology, particularly smartphones, social media, etc. These things seem to be contributing to diminishing the average attention span of the people in general. So these are quite important challenges that I've been thinking about, and I was also contemplating the spread and the influence of Judeo-Christian moral principles in the world in general. And I think that was in part due to the cooperation between, the historical cooperation between the Christian Church and various forms of visual and performance arts and literary arts. And this will be something that I will discuss with the Venerable in this recording, about whether we have something similar in our Theravada world, because this is not an area in which I have any knowledge or experience, and it's very curious to me. So the main idea is that people can be at least exposed to religious teachings and religious principles, moral principles, etc., through art, and probably way more than through a Dhamma talk or a direct religious teaching. And I think this is already the case in the West, with the spread of Judeo-Christian religious teachings or principles. And I think it's precisely the various forms of arts that developed in the West that were associated with Christianity or were based directly on religious themes. I think this is the reason why Christian values spread and continue to be the main source of moral conscience, if you will, in the West, in spite of the fact that Western societies have moved away from religion and have become increasingly secular. So I'm interested to examine how is the situation in the Theravada world, and to what extent do we really have forms of art in Asian societies that are effective in representing authentic and original Buddhist principles. So here is the interview I had with the Venerable Javanasami on the 7th of August in Shan State. It started when I was remembering my musical education, the time when I was studying music, and I studied Western classical music. But one of the things that I was very interested in is the origins of the musical art in the West. And actually, much of it comes from the Christian Church, where they had the Gregorian chanting. It's a kind of chanting that monks did that was quite similar in many ways to what we do, but it was a little bit more melodic. There's more melody to it, more developed. And this developed gradually into what we call polyphony. Polyphonic music is like more complicated. There is harmony. There are many voices that are singing at the same time. That development started in society, and it was mixed with the religious performances. And so this is very interesting that because later on all the music that we have, Mozart, Beethoven, all these big names in music, they originally come from a mixture of religious and secular. It was kind of like cooperation that that brought the musical art in the West. And then I started wondering whether we have anything similar. In the Theravada world. Most of the time we know a lot about what I found out is that I really don't know. I have no idea about how Asian society took the religious texts as a basis for art. I have no idea. I'm not informed enough about this, and it's interesting for me. Most of the time, it's easy for foreign people to learn about visual arts because things like architecture or paintings or ornamentation of pagodas and so forth. There are many resources about it, many books about it in English, for example. And I think that's because of the nature of visual arts. Like they're in front of you. You can photograph them. You can take a painting of them. You can study them carefully. And many foreigners do this and then write about it. The issue is different when it comes to literature and performance arts. This is basically what I want to learn about from you. Literature, the problem with literature is that it's written, like in the case here in Myanmar, it's written in a language that very few foreigners know. And I think that there are very few translations of Burmese literature into English or other languages. The problem with performance arts is that if it's like a musical performance or a theater performance, it happens and it ends and that's it. Unlike visual arts, they are momentary, they're fleeting, and then they disappear from history unless they are recorded. And this is also something that we know very little about. And I'm particularly interested in these forms of arts, literature and performance arts, that are inspired by or even directly use the religious texts that we have in the Theravada tradition. So basically Pāli suttas or Pāli literature in general.
Jataka stories are like...
Yes. So we'll give an example of this that we have in English literature.
Yeah.
It's okay. So, of course, there is very old stuff, like literature, poetry, for example, that is based on the story of the Buddha. We have something like the Buddha Charita. I don't know if you know it. And it's very interesting. It was written by a certain Aswaghosa in the 2nd century. And it's an epic poem describing the life of the Buddha. So this is old stuff. But I'd say I'm interested more in modern stuff, recent stuff. There are very few things, and the things that I know are in English. And an example is a famous epic poem also about the life of the Buddha. It's called The Light of Asia by Sir Edwin Arnold. It was written very early in 1879. And it's wonderful. I read most of it, not all of it. It's not based on Pali literature, but it's written in a time when there was a lot of sectarianism based on a text like a Mahayana or Sarvastivada text. It's not based on Pali literature, but the life of the Buddha that is represented in it is very much similar to what we have in Pali literature. There are some Mahayana elements, but and the poem that was written by Sir Edwin Arnold feels like the text that we have in Pali literature. It's a very wonderful epic poem. It's quite long, and this is an example of a work of literature that is based nearly directly on Buddhist religious text. So I'm interested to learn whether there is anything similar of that in Burmese literature. How much, how popular, to what extent it is known or read or performed in performance art.
In the meantime, Burmese people are losing interest in those literature that based on, Pali text, Jataka stories. But in the old time, let's say 200 years ago, people have to study these kinds of epic poem based on Jataka story, like Magadewa, which was solely on the Jataka, certain long Jataka, written in Burmese, rewritten in Burmese poetic style. But these days not nobody, but only a few people read it. And these days people are, more interested in conducting, dance relate to these Jataka stories, sutra. For example, in concert, they performed through this literature, but nobody study. Nobody study. Can only see when the expert give lecture on this, but not exactly the whole. The lecture is based on this, but part of it when they think their lectures connect to this kinds of poem. as I mentioned, Makadewa Linga is, long.
Is it an epic poem?
Yes, an epic poem. Also, Janaka Byo is written in, I think, 19th century, but it's very popular. Until today, people knows the name, but not really studying, not really using
Reading it.
Not reading.
So
anymore.
it is not widely read.
Not widely read. But people who learn this poem, this literature, like those concert people who present this to the audience on the stage.
On stage.
Yeah.
Is this still popular today?
Still popular between those people.
So this is very interesting. So the works of literature used to be produced in the 19th century.
Yeah.
And they were popular then as poetry.
True. And people get really into it, because almost everyone learned this poem.
These were written in Burmese.
In Burmese, yeah. Very long.
And that process of producing poetry, what I understand from you is that is reduced now, or is not happening anymore.
It reduced, like, almost not happening among normal, ordinary people, but only those concert people who dance, who organize the concert, because they want to use it for their business.
So this is very interesting, because this is the first time for me to learn about these titles that you gave. The Burmese epic poem. And I believe so many people don't know anything about such things.
People, as I say, they heard about the title, the name, but I myself, as a Buddhist monk, and I have learned a lot from Buddhists, but I have never seen the book. I have heard the name a lot, several times, I think hundreds of times. Someone quote from the book, but I have never seen that book.
This is interesting. So there is a need for the revival or preservation of this
True.
literature.
True. But lately, I remember lately a publishing, a businessman who published books. I think they republished this book. I have seen the information from Facebook. They're doing it. I think maybe part of preservation.
How many such epic poems were
Very popular, at least. I know, personally know three. But I believe there are more. Like Janaka Byo based on Janaka Chataka, Mahachanaka Chataka, and also Makadewa Lenga is based on Makadewa Chataka, and Wasansara Chataka, Wasansara Byo is based on Wasansara Chataka. Like this, we have 10 popular Chataka among Burmese Buddhist society. I believe all of the Chataka have written into poetry, I think.
And they are all based on the Jatakas.
Yes.
Do you know, because many people don't know that there are so many ethnicities in Myanmar and so many different languages. Like how many ethnicities?
Here total 165.
Wow.
Let me think. 100. Yeah.
Over 150.
Over 150
is already a lot.
Yeah.
Compared to most other parts. And so, do you know if there are any such similar literature in Shan or in?
Yeah, of course. Almost, the same tradition in Shan, in Mon. I have seen it several times. I can confirm Mon and Shan, they have same tradition, same literature
Mm.
on those Pali texts.
Mm. And do you know if there was any kind of like interaction between Burmese and Chan and Mon literature and
No, I have never learned this.
but they have the similar
They have similar literature.
Mm.
Even dance, not exactly the same dance, but based on the same
Ideas.
sutra, same jataka,
Mm.
but performed differently.
Very interesting.
The costumes are different, language different, but based on the same jataka story.
Mm. So, well, this is one thing. Now we know that there is a lot of, from your description, there is a lot of literature that is based on modern literature that is based on Pali texts.
Yeah.
I believe probably most of it never translated to English.
No.
This is
No,
of course
I
the
have never seen it.
first time for me
Yeah.
to even know that it exists. Of interest, I was just talking about the Light of Asia, an epic poem
Yeah.
written in late 19th century by Sir Edwin Arnold. It is similar to this kind of literature, but it's written in English. That's why it's very popular, and we know what we know about it.
Yeah.
This epic poem was made into a theatrical performance, a musical performance, maybe 10 years after its publication. And this was also in the late 19th century, so there is no recording of it or anything. And nothing remains of this theatrical performance apart from the musical score, the notation of the music, which is quite interesting. Like, I really hope to see this musical performance kind of like done again, because to the best of my knowledge it was never done ever since its performance in late 19th century. So we never heard that music or saw that performance. We just know that it happened. And so, from your description, it seems that these epic poems, Burmese or in other languages, were also made into musical, theatrical performance.
Yes.
So they used the text and they perform it.
Yes. It is like this. The particular composer who never performed, but they wrote it for the performance.
Musically.
Yeah, musically, and also for the performance in the theater. So they were, and they are always composer. They wrote it in this musical performance, and also sometimes this is not exactly music, but similar to music.
Yeah, we call it oratorio in English.
Yes,
it's not completely like a song, but it's a storytelling.
True.
With music in the background. Yeah.
So there are also such kind of people until today.
And this is still popular today.
In a town like Mandalay, is famous for this cultural performance. There are hundreds of performers still in Mandalay.
Very interesting.
They write, they perform this.
That same literature.
Same literature.
And well, if it's in Mandalay, I suppose that there are some recordings of these performances.
We can look up. We can even look up like on YouTube channel. Part of the performance they upload. People upload it on YouTube.
That would be the main difference between our present time and the time when the epic poem Light of Asia was made into theater. We have no performance of it. It's lost except for the musical score. So this is a big advantage that we have now, that we can kind of like record these performances. How would you evaluate the level of, let's say, skill in the performance? And I also know that in Myanmar there is a very strong musical tradition, singing tradition, and it's very unique to
Yeah.
Myanmar. Like it's we call it model form of singing or musical composition.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strong tradition. So how much skill there is and effort performers put in these theatrical performances.
I think they put a lot of effort in it because this become like their business.
Mm.
So they are professional, I would say that.
Mm.
They know the text very well. They transform it into the theoretical for to perform in theater.
Mm.
So they have to be well versed in this text as well as the literature
Mm.
and the Burmese writing. I mean,
Mm.
so this is quite professional. I evaluate
Very high.
yeah, very high.
Mm.
And I also found that some literature that they produce from the text, sometimes they mix it with local cult, local belief
Mm.
in like nature and
Mhm.
God.
They mix it
They
with
mix it with the local tradition,
Mm.
not solely, not purely the text.
Mm. So they add their own
The local cut practice.
It's very interesting. So what is the subject of, like most of the old and modern literature that is based on Pāli or other Buddhist Sanskrit texts is usually about the life of the Buddha.
Mm.
Most of the poems describe the life of the Buddha. So what is the subject of this literature and these theatrical performances?
I think it depends on the Chataka. But the main thing is the main purpose is to give message about religious teaching that involved in the text. So not only like the life of the Buddha, but there are always like message that they want to give to the audience.
Do they sometimes in the Sutta Pitaka we have many stories, events that are happening, and they're sometimes very colorful, very interesting. Do they sometimes do like enact the same story in these theatrical performances?
From sutra,
yeah.
Maybe there are some, but I have never come across with this kind of new invention from those new sutra, other sutra. Mainly these days, what I have seen, what I have witnessed with my own eyes, I've seen those the performance mainly on the old poet
Epic poem.
Based on epic poem. It's like they never invent, they never produce new
Text.
Yeah.
And what about these poems themselves, the original, or let's say the literature that was produced in the 19th century? What is the material inside? What is the subject of these?
If we look at it, Janaka or Wasan's bill, we call it bill. It's like a poem. Also, we can also sing it. It's all about the the personality that the Bodhisattva had in his before he became a Buddha. So the subject is, for example, the Visansara Jataka. It is about offering and
Dana.
In Janaka story, it is about effort. Never give up. Even if you are in very bad condition, never give up to get what you want. In this Jataka, the whole story is about effort, virya, like this. And Buddhadatta Charaka, it is about patient. It is about, you know, what is the other word for that? I forget.
Endurance.
Yeah, endurance of the torture, pain. So it is like, you know, different according to the story. So what the topic become what the story want to give to the audience.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And it involves something more than the description of the life of the Buddha. There is like a message that is to be given.
True.
It's very interesting. I think it will be, if anyone will be listening to this, they will want to see or maybe also hear the theatrical performances. So I myself, I can imagine how they are from what I've been here for some time. So sometimes I hear the music.
Yeah.
But it will be very interesting to see a recording of this if we can find on YouTube.
Yeah, we can look it up. And these days there's also, you know, like a new invention not based on the Buddhist text. The new invention, like what is happening in the country in the meantime, like politics, religion, and also economic. Those people who perform in theater, they also
introduce these new
introduce new dancing, new singing, and also like performance. They produce their own story. In it, we always see message that they want to give to the audience, also the government.
And so what I understand from you is that there is mixing of religious values, Buddhist religious values, with current issues in the society. And this was also being performed on theater.
And I remember in 2014 there was a performance about bad characteristic of monks. So the performers were criticized by lots of monks because they didn't like the performance.
So these theatrical performances are critical. They criticizing what they see negative in society, or also in religious affairs, in political affairs.
Yes.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
And I also think that the performers, on the stage, they also do kinds of research, what people want, what the audience wants, and what the audience like about the performance. They always observe it, and then I think they try to change a little bit to try to invent new performance.
Because this is their livelihood. This is how they make a living. It's very interesting. Further step, I suppose, would be to make an interview with those performers.
It's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah,
possible. And to see to have an interview about what they're doing from their own perspective, and whether they feel challenged by the changes in society, because this classical form of art, maybe this is very similar to classical music, for example, or classical theater, and these things are becoming less and less popular, say in Western society or in other parts of the world, because now you have pop music and you have modern contemporary forms of art. Are they still in business? Are they still popular?
Kind of. Not as popular as before, but they're still surviving. They are still surviving in their own, business. I mean, in Mandalay, there are about 10 famous group of performers who, if you want to hire them, you have to pay, thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Wow. For 2 nights. They always, perform for you 2 nights. This is normal performances. But if you want to hire them, at 3-4 nights, you have to pay double.
So they are very popular. This
They're
means
still
that
very popular. They have season like in winter. They're not doing the business in the rainy season because it's not a good time for them. People are producing their harvest, so they have no job in this season. But in from summer until winter, this is their season. But yeah, people, the performers, they are complaining that we become like less and less interested by people. We are making
less performance.
less performance. We're making less money.
So
because it's like you said, modernity, modern music. Nowadays, people, the young generation, they are more interested in modern music than those.
Especially
classical.
with the smartphone and social media, these things are very new and they're changing everywhere they go. They change it.
And lately, when I was conducting my research in the festival, they have to rent. They have to hire two types of musical performers. One modern. A singer, the other the traditional. Like
so there is competition.
Yeah, competition. The two stages. One is for those classical music performance. The other is for modern singers.
That would be very interesting to have an interview with them and see how they see their own selves and their art, because this is actually very serious. It might be regarded as it's a traditional form of art, but if you look, for example, in the West, classical music, even purely religious music, there is a form of religious chanting, and classical theater, like the works of William Shakespeare, for example. These things are very highly regarded, very highly respected, and performers feel proud that they are producing that kind of sophisticated form of art. And it's something in many countries is supported by the government, that the government supports this kind of classical forms of arts. And they are not necessarily popular. I believe like classical music is less and less popular nowadays than it was when I was young, for example, but they are still highly regarded and preserved. So this is that's why I was interested in it, because I noticed that there is something, that there is an cultural artistic heritage that is also related to our Buddhist texts, and that many people don't know anything about. I myself don't know much about. And particularly in Myanmar, like people know a little bit more about this same subject maybe in Sri Lanka. There's more foreign monks, there's more research or something. I myself don't know enough about the relationship between religious text and how it functions as a basis for culture and art in Theravada societies. It was very interesting for me.
You're right. People are less and less interested in these kinds of classical music and performance, but there's still some people who love it, who love doing it. For example, puppetry. In this performance also they also use the Buddhist text, Charaka story and those kinds of sutra, perform it. But locally, people do not want to see this kind of performance. There are lots of people who don't even know they
exist.
It still exists. But the people who are interested in this performance are from the West. They pay $10, $15 to watch it.
Yes.
I've been there twice with some foreigners who are interested in it.
Can you describe it for us?
And that performance, same thing. I have seen same
Text.
story, same text, like with Sandra about the dana, the donation offering, performed by puppeteer. Puppetry.
performance, yes.
So it is also quite interesting, and I have seen one local belief, local story. I think this happened hundreds of years ago about Nat, which is a Burmese word for deity.
Yes. Deities of nature.
Not exactly. As long as I have learned about this Nat, it was, normal people like us, normal men who was killed and because of certain accusation, and then he became a Nat. And the show was about his life, the story.
He's become like a deity with some power.
Yes. And people worship. And one Nat, it is funny and it is interesting. He was a drunkard before he became a Nat, a deity. When he passed away, people love his character of being a drunkard. And then he became a Nat, a deity, and until today, in some part of the country, they still worship this, they follow this.
Does he have some kind of special power, or if you worship him, what does he offer in return of worship?
Like, good fortune. When you play lottery, he can help you win.
Oh, that adds up now.
Yeah. So this kind of performance can be seen in both in puppetry and also in the stage
Theater,
performance in theater.
Very interesting. Are there other forms of performance art? Are there purely musical performances?
Yes. I would say yes. The music, always behind, always the performance. There's always a music about this story, on this story, produced from the Teleka.
Yeah, it's the same like oratorio, where it's a mixture of acting, dancing, and music, and the narration of the poem.
Yeah, exactly.
What about cinema?
Cinema.
The remarkable epic poem of The Light of Asia was made into a movie. The Life of the Buddha. One it is maybe in 1925, mid 30s or mid 20s. I don't quite remember exactly. Silent movie. It's the beginning of cinema.
I see.
And it was I think, joint British-Indian production.
I see.
And I've seen it. It's quite a nice black and white old silent movie, and it's also based on the epic poem. So, what about cinema?
I've no idea because monks are prohibited to go to cinema here.
Yeah.
But as long as I learn about the production from Burmese director, they rarely produce religious,
stories.
They make film. They rarely make film on religious story. But before the movie became popular, I mean, the video, there was a certain occasion that certain period that people watch a lot of video, not movie. They didn't need to go to the cinema, but they just borrow the videotape and then they watch it. There was kinds of production based on those kind of Jataka story.
Really?
Yeah, and also based on Burmese history from the ancient kingdom.
Yes.
There was, but not now. But these days people do not interested in it. They never produced those kind of movie. Yeah. I think everything is changing. These days people are not interested in those kind of old stuff anymore.
Mm. Mm.
Not only the movie, video, but also, you know, the education.
Mm.
Lakhs and lakhs students are studying history here in Myanmar.
Mm.
They don't want.
Mm.
What they want to study is medicine, engineering, those kind of subject which
Stuff
yeah,
that will they
lots of
get a
money,
job
yeah.
in the future. Yeah.
I think this is also kind of one reason that we're losing our culture.
Well, most cases, I mean, modernization happened a long time ago in the West, for example, and it always was on the expense of leaving behind these classical forms of arts. But also, actually, modernization sometimes also produce institutions that recognize the importance of these classical forms of culture and art, and then they find educational institutions that teach these things and propagate it, preserve it. It becomes like more preserved even than before.
Yeah.
So for the time being, you were talking about how there are 10 ensembles in Mandalay that perform that kind of art. Now these are the people who are preserving that form of classical art at present. And as the time goes by, you might lose it unless there is renewal of this thing. Even if it's not popular in society, it could become something that the government or the state is responsible of. And that's why I think the next step is to try to find recordings of these performances and to interview performers, because I'm very curious to see what is their perspective to what they are doing.
Yeah. You can do it in Mandalay when you have time, and in advance you have to try to get connection with those people. I think it is very easy because there are a lot of performers, not only one but hundreds of performers there in Mandalay.
Okay, last thing. In as much as I didn't know a lot about that situation here in Myanmar, I also don't know about it in other Theravada countries. For example, when I was in Thailand, I remember hearing from the monastery, a similar or some kind of like theatrical performance. Do you know if there are any similar art forms or culture in other Theravada countries?
I guess I have no experience with Thai traditional performance, but I have.
They have quite a strong tradition of theatrical.
I'm sure the Cambodian they have one exactly the same with what we had. As I occasionally mentioned about the Wasanta Chataka, the way they perform is different, but the story they based on is the same with Burmese people.
Same ideas, same patterns.
Ideas, same Chataka. So I'm sure Cambodian and Burmese, they have same literature.
So we learned today a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very highly
You're welcome.
appreciate it.